Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the AX virtual event sponsored by QuickTag. I'd like to introduce Kaylin Kelly and Phyllis Karpovich, who are both consultants at IBIS Inc. They will be going over business intelligence for AX. Thanks, and let's go ahead and get started. Hey everyone, this is Kaylin Kelly. I've been working at IBIS here for about 3.5 years. I've had my hand in BI pretty much the whole time I've been here, and I've been more on the GP side of things, and now we're bringing AX into the fold in terms of our globally business intelligence knowledge. And so it's great because BI is one of those things that's transferable. So some of the information that we're going to talk about today is based on a source system as opposed to being strictly AX. So some of the tools are going to be able to be used by multiple data sources, which is great because you don't need to just use AX. You can include other sources. You can pull other information together. And if you have any friends or internet blogs that use GP for their BI references, you'll be able to apply some of that information to AX BI as well. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that you're not stranded in the world of AX BI. Don't forget to look for general BI. And so our agenda today, first we're going to talk about BI and what it means, what it should mean to you. And then we're going to go ahead and look at some analysis cubes for Excel, which AX already has built into the product that Microsoft has developed. Then we'll take a look at some SQL Server reporting services reports. And then we'll take a look at Management Reporter and the role centers inside of AX. So I would just like to point out that these are all very similar to things that you can see in GP. So any of the things that we talk about today, just to re-emphasize that if you're looking up information about analysis cubes, reporting services, or MR, all that information can be applied to your environment. So I'm going to let Phil introduce himself now that I think he's become unmuted.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Karpovich. I've been with IBIS as a consultant for about 1.5 years now. Also, like Kaylin, mostly in the BI world and on the AX side. So I'll give it back to Kaylin to continue the presentation.
We're going to start by looking at this wonderful piece of eye candy here. So this is typically a little bit easier to do when I have people in front of me. So I'm just going to assume a couple of reactions from the people that are watching. So you're probably going to have one of 3 reactions. You're going to look at this slide and say, that kind of looks like what the sales guy told me. Or you're staring blankly at me. Or you're just not really sure what's going on in this slide. So let me explain. This is typically how BI is presented. Flashy, it's shiny, it's pretty, and that can be great, but it's not the most important thing about BI. So I want to start with a definition. Business intelligence is the ability to apprehend the interrelationship of presented facts in such a way as to guide action toward a desired goal. This was a 1958 quote. So this is not exactly a new thing. Business intelligence has been around for a little while. It has different ways of approaching the information now. New tools are being developed all the time. It's something that is grabbing some more attention. And so we need to not forget that it's not brand new. We have a lot of knowledge to fall back on. Howard Dresner said that concepts and methods to improve business decision-making by using fact-based support systems. So I want to point out here, decision-making, if you cannot use your data to actually assist you in making a decision, then you've just created some data that's pretty useless. It's pretty data, but if it doesn't help you in some way, it's not really going to be very important to you. Business intelligence is often referred to as an easy interpretation of volumes of data. So we're not looking strictly one transaction. We're looking at a group of transactions over time, over a grouping of customers or vendors. There's some kind of grouping or category or trend that we're looking for. and it is the ability to collect and react accordingly based on information retrieved. So again, reaction. This is something that will help you move forward and make decisions. And so Philip and I have come up with our own definition. Business intelligence is converting raw data into reliable and meaningful metrics for analysis. So if it's reliable, that means that you can count on the data. Every time you click refresh, you don't have to make sure that your data is validated. You've already done that, and now you trust it. And it needs to be meaningful. So if you have a chart that is 50% A and 50% B, it's going to be pretty useless unless you know what those A and B's are and why they're important to you. So the first thing we're going to look at is analysis services. And so analysis services and cubes, it might be a topic that you're already familiar with, but if you're not, SQL Server Analysis Services is part of the SQL Server package. SSAS is the acronym for it. OLAP is an online analytical processing. So that is the form that the analysis cubes take. And a cube is a collection of related master and fact tables. So the very base level of a cube is going to be a fact table, which includes the most granular piece of data. So if we're talking about invoices, it's going to be your customer, your item, all the way down to your account distribution. And then the master records are going to be what connects the higher level customer information, the item master, anything that's stored at that master level data, and it connects them together. So analysis services is going to take all of that information and take all the spaghetti that connects everything together, and it's going to present it in a more meaningful way. So when you're in Excel, you can just pull the dimensions straight in without having to think about how they're connected. So all of that logic is done on the back end. So when we're talking about cubes, Philip and I are going to be using these terms. So a dimension is a master record, for example, customer. So that would be the highest level. A member is going to be a point on that dimension. So customer K. Kelly is a customer. Therefore, it is a member of the customer dimension. An attribute is a description or collection of members. So if K. Kelly and Aaron Fitz and Whitney are all customers, then if they all live in Georgia, they would all be considered Georgia customers. So the attribute is a part of the dimension. A tuple is an intersection of data. So for example, new Georgia customers in 2014. So you have a couple of dimensions that you're using there. You're not just looking at customers, you're also looking at a time frame. So 2014 is going to be a member of time. A measure is a value at that intersection. So the intersection of your tuples is going to be a value. You'll either have a revenue, a quantity, something related to a customer. So these are going to be the dollars, the numbers. So the revenue and the quantity sold to new Georgia customers in 2014 is going to be a measure at the intersection of the tuple of new Georgia customers in 2014. And you're able to get that information because of the specific attributes on the customer level and the date level. The pivot field list is what you're going to use in Analysis Cubes. So Analysis Cubes is functionally in Excel. Excel is a good platform to use because you're probably already familiar with it. You know how to navigate it. And the primary use of the cubes is going to be in a pivot table. So if you're familiar with pivot tables, typically you're going to have a data tab full of all your information, and then you'll create a pivot table off of it. The analysis cube is going to present this pivot table field list for you, and it's going to contain this already logically organized information. So you'll see here in the green, those are your measures, your dollars, your units, your variance, anything that's a number or can otherwise be aggregated. So it can be summed or counted or averaged. The dimensions are going to be your master records, so your account If you have multiple companies, company is going to be an important dimension. That's one of the benefits of analysis services. You can run a report against all of your companies. You don't need to log into a specific company in AX and print a report and then switch and log to the next company and run it from there. You can get all of the company information consolidated. A hierarchy is going to be a collection of attributes. So, for example, master date is a dimension. The date hierarchy is going to contain the fields year, quarter, month, and day. So you have 4 different pieces of information that are already logically rolling up to this date hierarchy. So when you pull the hierarchy into your report, you're going to get all that information at once, and it's going to be organized in such a way that you can filter it really easily. And your attributes are going to be your individual member levels. So that's your day, your month, your quarter. The important thing to note, especially for the date dimension, if you choose an attribute like month, it is just looking at month. So if you pull a report for January, it will be January month for all years. So it'll be January for 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, all added together. So that's something to look out for. When you don't have a dimension in your report, it will assume all. So if you don't have company being filtered in your report, you are looking at all company information. In standard AX cubes, AX 2012 R3 is going to have 19 pre-built cubes. So for each of the separate modules, you're going to have a cube where you can reference the information found in AX. As you can see, there's a lot to choose from here. If you do not use environmental sustainability, that cube is not going to be very useful to you. But the ones that are used often are the sales, general ledger, purchasing, project accounting, accounts payable, accounts receivable. Those are some of the more heavily used cubes. But in case you are using environmental sustainability, there is a cube out there for you. To set up analysis services database so that it's a default install, you can configure the cube and update your licenses in this path. If you are working with IBIS, which all of you should be since you're in this presentation, IBIS can assist you with this, and we often do this automatically in the install. If you don't have it set up, or if you have some IT people internally that want to take a look at doing their own customizations or custom cubes, you would go to the system admin, set up business intelligence, analysis services, analysis servers. You can also connect to the cubes and add additional dimensions or measures. So just so you know, the ones that you see straight out of the box can be expanded on. Of course, the level of difficulty for adding new fields or calculated fields is going to depend on the request, but they can be modified. It's not set in stone. The cubes are created from perspectives in the AOT, so if you need a customization, it would be done here, and then it would roll into analysis services. There are a couple different ways that you can access the cube data. You can go straight to Excel using pivot tables and pivot charts, which can be really powerful and really handy that they're already in Excel. It doesn't change anything about your workbook. You can save it as a regular Excel document and email it, upload it, save it, and come back later and refresh it. You can build SSRS reports, so you can have a defined report layout that is referencing the data that you need. You can also use role center reports and KPIs. So if you build an Excel report, a SSRS report, or if you're just using the standard role center web parts, you can reference the analysis services. All right, so enough of me talking about the slides. I'm going to hand it over to Phil, who's going to do a demonstration on some of the default AX cubes.
Thank you, Kaylin. As Kaylin said, Excel is a great way to access your cube data. Users are familiar with it. The pivot table format is quite easy to use. Here I just have a normal Excel workbook. Nothing, no ads, nothing. This is kind of default Excel. So I'm going to go to the Data tab to create my connection to the analysis service cubes. So you go Data, Get External Data from Other Sources, and then From Analysis Services. This will open up this data connection wizard where you enter the server name you want to connect to, the server that the SSAS cube is on. For this example, I'm just using the period to represent the local server because it's on the same server I'm on right now. You click Next. It will then pull up a list of the cube databases you have installed. For this example, I'm going to select Dynamics AX R3 with ACS, and that will show you all the cubes you have in the database. Just like SQL databases, you have the database and then the cubes or tables inside of them. So you can see a list of all the cubes as Kayla mentioned. For this example, we're going to use the sales cube. So we just select that and select Next. And then we can create the connection file here. You can rename the file name to access it later, or you can just select Finish. And that message was just saying I already have a connection created. You can either use the previous connection you created or create a new one. You will then get this Import Data box, which is going to say how do you want to import the data. We're going to select the Pivot Table Report and then Existing Worksheet in cell A1 and just OK again. This will create your connection to the cubes and it will give you this Pivot Table field list, which is going to be all of your measures, all your dimensions, and all your attributes, which you can build your report off of. So for this example, I'm going to show you how to build a report that's showing your customer sales by a certain year for a certain state. And I'll show you how to format that to make it even better and more useful for business use. So first I'm going to go to the Show Fields dropdown and select the Customer Invoice line fields. What this dropdown does is it limits the field selection you have below to only fields that are related to the measures shown. I'll get into that a little bit more later and show you an example of when it doesn't work, but for now we'll just select the customer invoice lines. So first I'm going to select my measure. What I'm going to do is under this measure group, which you can tell by the sigma sign here, I'm going to select the customer invoice line amount accounting currency field and just drag that into the values field. That will show you the total value of customer invoice lines you have in your AX database across all dimensions, all attributes. As you can see, this is an unformatted number right now, and because it's a dollar amount, we're going to want to change that into a dollar sign. You can do that by going to this black drop-down arrow next to the measure, and it appears my system is hanging up for a second. Please bear with me. Kaylin, do you mind taking over?
No problem. All right, so you should be able to see my demo screen now. So I'm going to choose from the data. Let me double check my existing connections. I don't think I have a connection to what Philip was showing. So just like he did, I'm going to go from Analysis Services and connect to my server. And you won't need to memorize that server after you connect to it for each of the cubes. So under our Accounts Receivable cube, I'm going to rename this so that I know it's just Receivables cube. Oh, I'm sorry, Phil, were you in Receivables or were you in a different cube?
I was in the sales cube.
Oh, my mistake. So the difference between the sales and receivables cube is going to be the level of detail that you're going to get. So depending on what kind of information you want, you'll have to play with the different cubes and what they entail. The receivables is going to be more of a customer summary information, and then if we go to sales, that's going to be more to the item level information, kind of more detail. All right, so my layout is a little bit different. You'll notice then, Philip, I have this little gear icon and I can switch between different layouts of my field list. I chose this one because I can see more fields at once. So we're going to go to the customer invoice lines and include one of these measures. You'll see that we have quite a few to choose from. We have the invoice lines and the values. And we're going to choose the, shows how much I was paying attention, huh, Phil?
And it's going to be the invoice line amount accounting currency measure.
Thank you. All right. And I'm just going to change this value field setting to be a number format. So this is what Phil had been trying to do when he lost connection. So we're back up to speed now. So I'm going to select currency, and this will allow this whole field to be formatted. So this is a little bit different than selecting the field and changing it to currency. This is actually a format that'll stick with the data. And so my whole cell is going to change to a formatted number. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit here to see what I have available. So I have a company dimension. If I wanted to pull company into my report, you'll see that I have the short company name. And if I hold my cursor over that data, it'll give me a little more information. Pretty much all the information that you have available in your attribute list. If I wanted to use company name instead of company, I could include it in my report for a little bit more detail. Maybe if someone doesn't know that Contoso Entertainment System Brazil is actually BRMF. You'll also notice that my report got kind of ugly when I did that. So if I have information that's a one-to-one relationship, I'm going to have an ID and a name for a company. I'll never have two different names for the same company. I can go to my Design, Pivot Table Design tab and change my report layout from outline to tabular. And what that's going to do is push everything over to the right, so I have a single line for my information. I'm going to resize this a little bit so you can see it. And then I'm going to remove my subtotal. So I don't need a subtotal anymore because I don't need to know that there's a subtotal for a one-line item. So now I have each of my company IDs followed by the name and then my customer invoice amount. That's a pretty detailed measure for a company level, but just to show you that tabular is available, it can be really powerful in a lot of reports. So now since I've done that, I've decided I don't want that information in my report anymore. My company isn't really going to dictate what I look at here. I'd rather it be filtered on a specific company. So I can either filter it in my rows, or I can move my company information from my rows section up to my filter. I can also click on my little black arrow and I can move it to rows or columns. So there's a couple different ways to do that. If it's easier for you to use the black arrow as opposed to dragging and dropping, you can do it that way. And now I'm going to select from my filter drop-down. I'll expand my all member because, like I mentioned before, everything's going to roll up to all. So if it's not in your report, it'll default to that all member. And then I'm going to choose my preferred company. And so what was the company you were using earlier with all the good data in it?
USMF.
Thank you. And you'll see that my company name is Contoso Entertainment System USA. If that doesn't mean anything to me anymore, I already know what the name of the company is. I can either click on the black arrow and remove the field, or I can deselect it from my field list, or my favorite, because it's a little more satisfying, I can grab the attribute and throw it out of my pivot table. And if I scroll down here, you'll see that I also have my currency available. So if you're using MultiCurrency, that functionality is available here in the cubes. If I continue to scroll down, I have a customer dimension. So here under my More field, I have all the information related to the customer master. So the city, the state, their terms of payment, their default customer group, all this information here. I also have the customer invoice account. I'm going to make this screen a little bit bigger. So that's based on your your customer invoice setup as opposed to your customer master. I also have a date dimension. I have a regular date. I also have a due date and an exchange rate. If you are using MultiCurrency, that's probably going to be more important. And if I keep scrolling down, you'll see that I have a lot more fields to choose from. So there's a lot to do here. I'm going to scroll back up to my date dimension. Hopefully that scroll bar caught up with me. And I'm going to include a hierarchy into my report filter because I only want to look at a specific piece of information. And actually I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to put it in the columns instead, not to confuse you. So we'll see here in the date, the hierarchy is named kind of logically to help you figure out which hierarchy to choose. But if I expand my arrow, I can see what's included in that hierarchy. So my date hierarchy includes year, month, and then date, which is going to be your lowest level day member. So if I check that box, it instinctively knows that that's a date, so that it should probably go in the columns because that's where we most often see our dates. You'll also notice that my year is bold because that's what's visible right now. If I expand my calendar year 2012, you'll notice that my month's now bolded because that's my next visible item. And if I expand it again, it's going to go all the way down to the day level. So if you have a particular date you want to investigate, or if you're really interested in looking at the first day of the month, the 5th day of the month, you can filter all the way down to the day. So I'm going to expand back up my hierarchy here, and I'm going to filter on just 2012. Now filtering has a lot of capability here, so I can either go to my filter button, deselect all of my members, and then hunt for the year that I want, which will filter down. Or I can do it another way, and since I've already filtered, I'm just going to hit the undo button, so Control-Z. That is pretty cool if you do a lot of reporting because Excel actually has the ability to do undo. If you're using other reporting tools, undo is not always available, so this is kind of a bonus to be using Excel. Another way to filter, I can right-click on the selected attribute, and I can filter keep only selected items. And what this does is keeps you from having to hunt down that list to find the exact item that you want. So that can be pretty handy. You can also use Control and Alt if you wanted to select multiple members to filter on. You'll also notice over here that there's a little funnel next to my hierarchy. So now that I have selected a year, I have a filter on this hierarchy. And this is a visual indication that I am actually filtered on something. So if you don't want to be filtered, you want to see all the data, you would need to remove that filter either by clicking the drop down and clearing the filter, or you can go up to your Analyze Pivot Table option, and under the actions you can clear all or clear filters. Clear all is actually going to remove all of your dimensions from the pivot table if you wanted to just start over. All right, so I'm going to scroll up a little bit here, and I'm going to pull in some customer information. So I'm really interested in my states. I have a lot of regional information based around my customers. You'll notice that the very top one is blank. So that's one of what I consider the major benefits of analysis cubes. It's going to pull in everything. So if you don't have a state set up on your customer and you're trying to build a report, maybe a query in SQL, and you're filtering on a specific state name, and your customers don't have a state name, you're not going to be able to pick them up in your report. So this allows you to see everything and do a little bit of troubleshooting. Also, if you had something like GA and some customers had Georgia spelled all the way out, you would be able to visually see that you have that record stored in properly, and then you can go back to the database and fix it. So I'm also going to include in my report my customers. So I would really like to see my customer name. So if I include that, It's going to show in my tabular form still because I selected that design. So I can remove these totals by right-clicking and unchecking my subtotal state if I don't want to see those subtotals. If the subtotals are important, I can leave them in my report. So now I have a variety of customers in each of my states. If I wanted to see all of my California customers, you'll see here that they're not really sorted in any way. So I can sort that by going up to my customer attribute and sorting from Z to A, and that's going to automatically change my sorting. If I had been using the standard compact layout, it's going to have a drop-down list, and I'm going to have a level filter here that I can flip between state or customer if I wanted to select either one of those to sort by. So changing it to tabular does make it a little bit easier. If you want to sort, you just simply select that filter header and sort from there. All right, so maybe I just want to see California, so I'm going to select it, filter it, and keep only selected items. And from here, you'll see that I have it still sorted. And maybe that's not really good enough. I don't really know what that number is telling me. So I can highlight all of those numbers and add a really quick little chart, graph, if you will. So if I go to the Home ribbon, Conditional Formatting, Data Bars, this is a really quick and easy visual indication of your data without having to create a separate chart or graph and manage that. So I can select a color, and this is going to visually show me that, first of all, my sorting did not work when I switched there. Not sure what's going on there. Of course, it's demo data, so sometimes it can be a little unpredictable. But that is a great visualization for me to see my numbers compared to my total. If I expand out and clear my filter on state, I can now see that across each of my state, all my customers, I can see the visual impact. I can continue playing with this pivot table. Maybe I just want to see states. I don't care about my customers anymore. I can see that California is my biggest state. I should probably pay a lot of attention to those customers. Or maybe I want to look for my lowest performing state and reevaluate the salespeople that are assigned to that state. Alrighty, let me check here with Philip and see if he was able to get back into the demo, if there's anything else he wanted to show us right now.
I am, and the last thing I was going to show was what happens if you select a field group that's not related to your measure, or if you select a dimension that's not related to your measure.
Okay, and that reminded me of one more thing. So before we switch back over to you, I'm going to show something that I think is helpful. I'm going to insert a slicer, and slicers can be really fun in a report. It also keeps your report from getting too cumbersome. So let me explain what I mean there. If I select the measure group I was working on, I'm going to scroll down to my date dimension, and I want to include my date year here. So this slicer is going to be an interactive filtering. So if I clear my filter right now, you'll see that my slicer has the 2 years available where I have data. So if I select my calendar 2011, it's going to automatically filter my report here. And then I can flip back to my 2012. So this is a little bit easier of a filtering instead of having to click on the little drop down every time I want to change the year. It's a little visual, and it can be connected to multiple reports. If I have multiple reports in my workbook, I can connect this slicer to them, and it will update my date on all the reports that I have included in here. All right, Philip, I'll turn it back over to you so you can talk about the measure groups.
Okay, so just rebuilding the pivot table that we had a second ago. So going to select the customer dimension, customer name attribute. I've already selected the customer invoice line accounting currency measure. I can just change that to a $sign again by using the black arrow, number format, and then currency. And so we have a report that's minus the date, very similar to what we just saw. I'm then going to take the date field, add to the columns, and there we go. What I'm going to show you now, though, is what happens if you select a dimension that's not related to the measure group. You'll get data errors, and you will not get usable data. And this is what you can determine by the show fields. So as long as you have the show field selected, you won't have an issue with relationships not working. So we were in the customer invoice lines show fields list. I'm going to go to the sales order lines and then go down and select something from the sales order dimension. So complete. I'll drag that to the columns, and I'll actually get rid of the date for this example. And as you can see, across the complete, which we have no, yes, and unknown, we're getting the same value across each of those attributes. Again, this is because the customer invoice line amount has no relationship in the cube to the sales order line amount, or the sales order complete, I'm sorry. If you see all of your rows being the same, all of your data being the same, it's probably because of a relational error. Of course, if we go down to the sales order lines measures that are related to this, we can get rid of the customer invoice lines and then pull in sales order lines count maybe. And that will still give us the same issue. And that's because we have the customers related to the sales order lines. So that's what we had for the Excel cube demo. Moving on next, we're going to go back to the presentation, and we're going to get into SSRS reports. SSRS reports stand for SQL Server Reporting Services. This is another part of the SQL Server package that you can run reports off of and build reports. And we'll show you a demo in a minute of how to actually build the reports out of AX. Inside of AX, these SSRS reports, SQL Server Reporting Services reports, are going to be the default reports you see. So in any of the AX modules, when you select the reporting dropdown and you generate a report out of AX, you will be getting an SSRS report. They can either be stored in the native report server, which is kind of the standard for storing these reports, both in AX and outside of AX, or inside of SharePoint, and you can have a report library on SharePoint. Also, if you have a IT staff or you want to actually change your reporting service or server, you can change these from the very similar location to the analysis server. That's going to be system admin, setup, business intelligence, reporting services, and a report server. And you can also change the report server and the report deployment setting. So next what I want to talk about is when to use cubes, specifically in Excel, versus when to use an SSRS report. The cubes in Excel, they're great for showing aggregated data. So as we saw, you can see the total amount of sales lines per year per customer in a state, whereas a report, an SSRS report, is much better for showing detailed transactional data. So if you wanted to see every single sales line for a customer for a state, it'd be better to use an SSRS report. Also, with the cubes, you have a much broader selection of data categories. You can select everything that's in the cube and build a report kind of on the fly with whatever you have already in the cube. Whereas with a report, you're pretty limited to what you can select from based on how the report's been designed. You can add filters to the report and you can kind of select the data, but again, it has to be built into the individual report design. Also, as you saw with Excel, you can have a very flexible layout. You can, if you want to change where your rankings are, where your dimensions are, you can easily change those on the fly. Whereas with reports, you have to have it pre-designed and you can't really change the report layout once it's created. And by you, I mean the end users. Sure, you can have your IT staff go in and generate a new report, add a field, remove a field, but that takes time and it's nowhere near as ad hoc as the Excel cube reports.
All right, and I will just show a really quick kind of end result of the demo as opposed to running through the entire demo. So my screen should be back up, and I'm just going to open SQL Server Data Tools here, which is where you would do your SSRS customizations. So this is a report that I had built, and I have a couple of different things that I need to include in this report. As you can see by the general layout, this is much more of a developer tool as opposed to an ad hoc tool like the analysis cubes are. You actually need to have a little bit of knowledge about how to create your report, whereas you can hand analysis cubes to a variety of users and have them get their own data. And so I have a data source here that's going to be linked back to my AX database, my data set, which is pulling all the information from my vendor table, and my parameter, which is my date. So the report I have here is my vendor group, and the modified date, and my report is based on my modified date. So if I do a preview of this report, you can see that my date of today is the modified date, so my report is pulling back all of the vendors in my database that have been modified and the vendor group that they belong to and when they were originally created. So you can see this modified by is actually the user I was using earlier when I modified these vendors. So as you can see here by this report, it is more rigid, just like Philip said in our comparison slide. It is static. You can use this in a variety of different ways, but again, it's not really an ad hoc tool. All right, so let me switch back over to our slide deck so I can talk about Management Reporter. The Management Reporter is a program that comes as a accounting-based tool. So you're going to get your information from the general ledger here into Management Reporter, so it's a little bit different from the cube, which has a cube for each module. Management Reporter is functionally financial tool. It has 4 different major pieces to it. The row definition, which is going to most often be a list of your accounts or a grouping of your accounts or somehow calculations of the account. Your columns, which are typically going to be your date information, so your current period or each individual month in a year versus a different year, or even your budget information. The reporting tree is a hierarchy of data. I most typically see this used with departments or cost centers or something that needs to have a different report. If you need to declare financials for different companies, but you want to run the report consolidated, a tree is a really good way to accomplish that and just have one master report instead of having to run 10 different reports for your 10 different companies. And then the report definition is what's going to put all of those pieces together to create one total report. So our row definition is going to look very similar to this. This is just a screenshot out of Management Reporter. And we will see here that we have our accounts listed on the very first column. We have some total calculations, which are summing up. For example, total revenue is a combination of sales returns, and other income. And then our link to our financials dimension, and I apologize for using a Dynamics GP screenshot, but that is just to emphasize that Management Reporter is a cross-platform tool. So if you are coming off of GP, or if you have a company that you just acquired that's using GP, this tool can be used GP and AX. So it's great that Microsoft has that one tool to support both products. You're not separate there. The column definition is where we're going to put the date information. So in this example, you'll see that it's quarters. I'm looking at the activity per period, per quarter, so it would be period 1 through 3 in quarter 1. And then my total column is a calculation of all the periods, so it would be the entire year. My tree definition here is going to be my departments. So you can see here that there's a variety of levels to my tree. I have my entire company at the very top, summary of all units. Then I have my main office node, which includes my overheads, my admin, accounting, sales. And then I have my sub-offices, which are my service, consulting, purchasing field. So if you wanted to look at just your main office's expenditures without including in your field services, you could just look at your main office node of this tree. My report definition is where I'm going to put those three pieces together. So my row definition here, all right, is going to be my balance sheet. So I can use my row, and in my little arrow here is a drop down that I can select my rows to use. So after you set up this report once, you can change the row that you would like to use. And then I have here my column information. So I would select the column. I can use the same report definition and use my drop-down list if I wanted to toggle between maybe a year-to-date and then look at a periodic and kind of look at my data across different time periods. I don't need to change my entire report. I can just update my column selected. And then I have a tree type, and these two are kind of together. Forgive my very terrible circles. I should work for ESPN with their circling. Hopefully I have some football fans out there that understood that one. And then from here I can choose my tree level. So I would like my divisions to be used here, or I can take the same row and column and change my tree type so that I have a different way to slice my data. Maybe I wanted to look at cost centers instead of divisions. Then when I get ready to run my report, I would choose my time period up here, and then I would generate my report from here. I also have the ability to select one company or multiple companies, so I can run it consolidated or not consolidated. I also have my detail level. I can go all the way down to the transaction if I would like. For processing, of course, it's faster to run it at a more high level, which is the financial, but you can go all the way down to transactional information. We always recommend running for posted activity only. You can run it for unposted transactions, but just because we like to suggest posted only so that you know that you're looking at one version of the truth instead of looking at the unposted activity that someone hasn't gotten around to posting yet. There are also a couple different settings that you can set up here. You can include headers and footers and some other settings that are specific to this individual report. All right, so I'll stop drawing and we'll go to the next slide. So the way that these get consolidated together, I have my rows, which are vertical here, my columns, which are horizontal, and then my report data is going to be the combination of all of those rows and columns. So my sales for quarter one is going to appear in the sales quarter one column, etc. for all of my different intersections of data. And then I have my tree information, which is going to create a different report for each individual tree. So when I select main office, I will see the entire report, but only the data related to that main office category. And then if I go down and select my overhead specifically, it will show the same report again, but only with my overhead account combination. All right, so let's take a look at a demo. I'm going to show my screen. All right, so I should have Management Reporter open over here. And I went ahead and selected my 12-month trend income statement report. I have all the companies shown, and from here I could select one to run it for an individual company. I have my financial and account detail, and I'm looking at only post activity. My base period is going to be September, and I'm going to change it to 2012 because I have some demo data, and they're not quite caught up to this year yet. My row definition is selected here, or I can choose from my drop-down any of my other row options. I'm using a tree called Business Unit Cost Center Department. I also have the ability here to choose a starting unit. So if I wanted to just look at sales and marketing for this report and save this report definition as sales and marketing, and then give the sales and marketing department access to run it on their own, I can do it that way without having to create a different tree for sales and marketing. I can just leverage my tree and control the tree starting units and then grant security just to particular reports. All right, in my output and distribution, I have the ability to send this to a library location, one or more locations, including a shared directory. I can include headers and footers here. The @ is going to be some auto text. There's a variety of auto text you can choose from here, including your date and time with a couple of different combinations of formatting. If you want it long, that would be the entire date. Short would be the abbreviated month dash day dash month dash year, depending on what country you're in. Of course, that will be a little bit different looking. You can include page numbers, text straight from the reporting tree. If you have a very intense tree with lots of members, you might want to make sure that those are visible in every part of the report. Or you can include some other information like a rounding precision if you're rounding and you want to print that on the report every time. I can also include images. These can be pretty fun if you want to put your company logo in the report somewhere. You can include it right here in the definition without having to send it to the art department to add a image later. I also have some settings that are going to revolve around your processing order. I can round here, so if I wanted to round my entire report, I can do that in one click. The processing order is going to depend on if you're using a reporting tree or not. I'm not going to go into detail here because if you are having problems with rounding, processing order is where you're going to want to go first for that. Or if you have a variance calculation and it doesn't seem to be summing correctly, the processing order is where you're going to want to go there. I can also choose to display blanks or zeros and a lot of other options over here that I'm not going to discuss because it's not going to do a lot of good for me to read them unless you need them. So if there is something on a report that you want changed, there is likely the ability to do it in the report setup. So if you always want your negative numbers read and you know that that's a function in Excel, don't waste time exporting it to Excel just to change it to red when you can change this display checkbox in your report layout. Okay. And since I have my base information set up, I can select my generate button. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and click the button just to the left of that. And this is the last generated button. So when I click here, it's just going to open the report the last time I generated it without having to go through all the effort of generating every time. Okay, so now you see my gorgeous income statement across all of the months. So each month has its own column as well as a year-to-date at the very end. This is the default view. If I don't want my report in this view, I can download either to XPS Viewer, Excel, or my Management Report or Report Viewer, which is a separate program. So you would need to install that separately if you were giving this report to someone in the field. If you go straight to Excel, you don't need to install anything extra because you have your internet browser, which should be available on most computers, and then Excel, which is also often found on operating computers. My reporting tree is going to be in the bottom left. So if I click here, you'll see that based on my tree, I have a summary, and then I have my home node, followed by my sales and marketing cost center, department, and then my trade show cost center. So sales and marketing has costs split between their marketing campaigns and their trade shows. If I click on any individual node, it's going to change my report and jump down to that level. So you can see now that I am looking at operations. If I wanted to go back to the top, I can just go back to my reporting tree, click on the summary, or I can use this little back button here to jump back to where I just was. If I'm looking at my sales information and I want a little more detail on this number, I can click straight on January, and that'll drill down into what makes up that number. So I have two different departments that create sales for me, my home sales and my auto sales. If I select my auto sales, I'm going to see that my auto sales includes my operating as well as legal. So when I'm not sure what kind of company this is, but they must deal with maybe auto insurance. So if I click into my operations just to see why this number even exists, I can now see that my service operations are going to be the only cost center. And from here, I can drill into the individual account because I created my report to allow account level drilling ability. And so for this specific, very long descriptive account, I can see across each month. And you'll notice as I scroll over these months, there's a little black arrow. If I hover on that, I can open to Microsoft Dynamics. So if I'm using Management Reporter with a data mart, which is important, data mart is the only way that you can do this drill back feature into Dynamics GP. The traditional layout does not allow that. So just so you're aware that this drill back feature requires data mart. And you can see my Dynamics AX is processing down here. So we'll wait on it for just a second. This is a demo environment, so we don't have quite as much memory and RAM on this server as we would on a production server. There we go. And it pulled up straight into my AX voucher window the exact transaction that I drilled into. So for this June transaction, I can see the ledger that it hit as well as the value. So that's a really easy way to get from my reporting tool straight back into my transactional database. I'm just going to close this. All right, I'm just going to show you what it looks like when we export to Excel. If I click on Download and Open in Microsoft Excel, it's going to ask that I download something, and yes, I do want to download it. And then I will be able to open my report in Excel. And you can see here that the layout might need a little bit of TLC based on the formatting. And I just clicked Enable. Usually that takes a second. I did create quite a large reporting tree to expand this down to, so this is not a terribly small report. And you can see here that I have multiple tabs in my report. So my Summary-F is going to be my financial level. Summary-A is going to be the individual account information. And then for each level of my tree, each department and each cost center, I have a different tab. So if I wanted to generate this to Excel and maybe send individual tabs to people, I can save them off from here. Or I can open up my slide deck and scroll down to a specific cost center or part of the reporting tree I wanted to look at. Alrighty, so I'm going to flip it back over to our slide presentation to talk briefly about role centers. I'll let Philip take us away on that one.
So now that you all have seen the reporting and BI available in AX, we're going to show you the role centers. And the role centers are a way to consume and quickly view this BI and view these reports. and we'll show you what they are in a second and show you an example inside of AX. So the role centers are located either, or can be accessed either on the AX homepage or on the enterprise portal site itself. One thing to note though is that role centers do run on SharePoint, so you do need a SharePoint server set up to access these role centers and to utilize the role centers. The role centers are made up of these pieces called web parts. The web parts are almost like building blocks of the role center, which can connect to different data sources and show you different information. Some of these are going to be SQL Server Reporting Service Reports, SSRS reports. You can have analysis services or cube reports, dashboards, graphs, charts, or KPIs. You can also have links to Management Reporter. As Kaylin showed you, you can view these Management Reporter reports inside of a browser. You can actually link right to those from your role center. And you can also have worklists and queues. These are going to be pieces that connect back to AX and show you either tasks you have to complete or tasks that are assigned to you, or alerts inside of AX. So I'm going to open up AX and share my screen. And this is going to be an example of the CFO role center. One thing with role centers is they are a number of them you can build. There's quite a few pre-built that come with AX, and you can also build them pretty easily. You can have them for anything from a CFO, CEO level, all the way down to a middle manager, so an accounts receivable manager or an accounts payable manager. And then you can have them down to the actual maybe accounts receivable clerk or AP enterer as well. And different levels will have different, you can include different pieces of information. So as you can see here, we have a number of web parts, and a web part is going to be each of these green headers indicates a new web part. So we have a bank account balance web part, accounts receivables aging summary web part, and then some performance indicators and KPIs or financial ratios. Each of these web parts can be configured independently and can be added to or removed from your role center. And you can also personalize your role center to add or remove web parts. So as we see here, we have the bank account balance web part. This is going to be pulling from actual AX data, so from the AX transactional database, and this shows you a snapshot of where your bank accounts stand currently. You then have the AR aging receiving, accounts receivable aging summary, which is going to be based off of a SSRS report, which is showing you a snapshot of how many dollars you have in aging and how many days outstanding it is. Again, because this is demo data, we're showing almost all of our ARs out 180 days or over due. But in a normal data environment, you'll see a broad range of past due and how far past due the invoices are. We also have the organizational performance indicators and financial ratio web parts. These are actually pulling data from the cubes themselves, and you can see kind of either your cost of goods sold, your net sales revenue, or your gross profit margins, as well as some KPIs and financial ratios such as your quick ratio, days cash on hand, or average days to pay. Again, you can add indicators, add KPIs to either broaden or narrow the view of the information you're seeing. There are also web parts that actually pull, again, from AX. So you can have web parts such as open vendor accounts with a large balance. So you can quickly see your top 10 largest outstanding vendors that you owe money to. You can also add links either inside of AX or to outside of AX. This is where you could add a link to a management reporter report, or you can link back to a page in AX. So you can link to all your customers if you wanted to, and this will open the customer list page inside of AX quickly. These links can be set to pretty much any list in AX, as well as any filtered list in AX as well. So to go back to the role centers, we can go back to the home module. And the last two pieces then, or the last three pieces, are going to be the My Reports, the work list, and the financial activities. The work list, as we discussed, is going to be a list of all of the alerts that pop up or notifications, and these are tied to your user alone. So if you have a batch job running, or if you have a workflow set up to send you alerts to approve something, they will come into this work list where you can take action on them. You also have, it's labeled here financial activities, but these are work queues. These are based on filters inside of AX, which you can set to say if it's past due invoice or if it's X amount of days past due. You can pull it into here, and it will show you a number and a count of how many you actually have. you can then click on the link here, and it'll take you to that filtered list. So we're clicking on customers past due, and this will show you all the customers you have that are past due. So you can see quickly what you have past due and take action on that. And the last piece we have is the My Reports. These are links either to SSRS reports inside of AX, so ones that are built and deployed inside of AX, or again, you can link here to management reporter reports that are external, but you can still access them quickly and easily from this location. So that's everything I have on role centers. Going back to the presentation. And I believe the last slide is just for questions. So
all right, thank you. Sorry about that, Phil. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you learned something today. If not, I hope you enjoyed an hour of listening to us talk. If you have any questions, feel free to send them in to this email listed here. Thanks, Caitlin and Philip, and thank you for joining us today. And you can also download this PowerPoint in the handout section. Thanks, and have a great day.